And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the Melanin Initiative. I'm Dr. Kimberly Madison, a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and one of your co-hosts here for the Melanin Initiative podcast. In healthcare, there is often too much information and not enough time. Here at the Melanin Initiative, we avoid TMI. By breaking things down into language you can understand, we create a safe space for you to ask your questions and share our nursing perspective without taking too much of your time. So, this is actually a really special episode. It's the end of a multi-series that I do with my mother here, Reverend Leona Madison. So, for October, we had her on for multiple episodes in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and because I was familiar with her journey, I thought we would do it justice by dedicating each episode to different phases in her journey. We talked about diagnosis, treatment, life after treatment, and today we'll be talking about faith and medicine. It's a really important topic, particularly in Black and Brown communities. I don't know if the public's aware, but in our training, we go through what we call culturally competent care, where you're providing care for people based on their culture and ethnic preferences, history, and experiences. And so on the chapter of African Americans or Black people, there's always attention paid to the role that spirituality and religion and the way it influences both the ability to facilitate care and also barriers to people receiving care. And while things have changed and continue to change in the church, when it particularly comes to the Black church, the Baptist church, there are some traditions that I wanted to just give some attention to, particularly because, when it comes to weddings or funerals, homecoming, it's often associated with food. Those foods might be high in sodium, sugar, salt, fat. And at the same time, those same people indulging in those food items are also standing up to give testimonies that are more often related to their health or disease. There's the sick and shut-in list. There's the people who tell us that they were on their sick bed, that they died 3 times, that they were brought back to health. Even this morning, we're filming this on a Sunday, I was watching a very popular church, and they were talking about how they have a cafe, really a restaurant in their church. And, they were talking about some of the items on the menu, which were shrimp and grits, which are typically laden with butter. Seafood is high in cholesterol. They're adding salt. And so it's just a very interesting conversation, because so much of the time we're taught that if you have faith, you don't need medicine. There is a belief that people in healthcare don't have faith, that they don't attend church. There's that saying, there's a doctor, he'll be your doctor in the sick room. But, your nurses and doctors are also people of faith, and they pray. And so they have those kind of relationships. And so I just wanted to give some attention to it. This is the beginning of a series that'll go on for a long time, called Faith and Medicine. And my mom's going to come in and close out her section on breast cancer and also help us open up this one. So before we get into our questions, which will include some of those tough questions that we often hear about, I want to just go over our disclaimer really quickly. This show is for educational purposes only. The opinions expressed here are our opinions alone. They are not a representation of any of our affiliations. If you're experiencing a medical emergency, you should seek medical attention and medical guidance from your healthcare provider. If you're experiencing a physical emergency, you can call 911. And if you or someone you know might be experiencing a mental health emergency, you can call 988. So, we can get long-winded. And so we just want to jump right into it, because we're actually going to split this up into 2 episodes. This first one, we're going to close out her section by talking about how faith played a role in her journey specifically. And then we'll come back and talk about answer those tough questions from her perspective as both a minister and a scholar. So welcome back, Mommy. How have you been?
Good morning. I have been wonderful. Thank you for having me once again.
And I believe when you all watch this, I haven't quite decided, but I think this will be our Christmas special. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Yeah, I was telling her how much I love her shirt, her collar. It's really perfectly themed.
Thank you.
I wish I had all my Christmas decorations up. That would have been super nice.
That's okay.
Okay, so let's just jump right into it. So if you can just share with us the role that faith played in your journey. And let's start with when you got that diagnosis.
Okay, well, as you know, faith is one of my best topics, and um, a journey that I decided once I was first diagnosed, I had to decide how was I going to cope with it. Um, Unfortunately, breast cancer wasn't the most severe um, diagnosis that I received throughout my life. But when it came down to breast cancer, I decided that because I trust God, I was going to use my faith that I always talk about, teach about, and preach about. And that's how I was going to um, be on my journey with.
Okay, and so throughout your treatment phase and even after that was over and you still had to keep going back to doctor's appointments and wait for different test results to come back, did your faith change in any way, or did you have any questions for God?
My faith never changed. If anything, it had increased through a lot of prayer and fasting, and not to the point of asking God that there would be no cancer when I already knew that there was cancer, but to the point that regardless of what it was encountered, because I did not know what was ahead. And I stood on the word of God that says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So I believe that although I didn't know what it was going to be like to be on chemo or have the radiation, or pathology reports, any of that information, I relied on my faith to strengthen me and to give me the confidence that God was in control.
And what about the people around you? Did their faith strengthen you in any way? And did you have any people around you whose lack of faith may have impacted you?
I had plenty of people around in my circle that believed in faith and prayed about faith and continued to remind me about this faith that I, always, like I said, always talked about and also instilled in them when they were going through their journey, about this faith journey. And so now, because my back was against the wall and I had my diagnosis, I felt that I had to practice what I preach. And so I had to really walk and elevate my faith level. There were some people who I didn't understand what I was talking about. Like, you got this diagnosis and you're going to rely on faith, you just must be crazy, something must be wrong. But it's a personal journey. Everybody chooses how they, want to take on their own personal crisis. And so I just choose faith over that, knowing that the God that I've served, and I've been a baptized believer all my life at the age of 12, that I was going to continue to trust God.
Okay, so now I kind of regret that I showed you these questions because you're giving us the very what we're used to hearing. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So I know you gave us the scripture, but in your own words, how do you explain faith, particularly to those people who have lost it?
How I would explain it is that if you have to believe in something. You should believe in something. Everybody believes in something.
Well, can't you just believe in yourself?
You can believe in yourself, but how is yourself going to heal you? You need something that you could depend on that's going to get you through.
Well, I have my produce. I work out all the time. I stay in good spirits.
Well, you still need more than that. And then that's where, because we are intelligent beings, that's where I believe medicine come into play. Because of course, with the breast cancer diagnosis, I think I was eating pretty well, but still there was something in my body that did not belong in there. And so that's why I had to trust God, believe in faith, and believe in the medical community that I believe that He had appointed for me during that time.
And did you ever get angry with God?
I never got angry with God. No. What I did was, and it was years later, after I went through my treatment, is that I had a conversation with God because I was the type of person who had a checklist for life. I wanted to have my kids at a certain age. I wanted to be married at this age. I wanted to go to college. I had a checklist for life. And unfortunately, cancer was not on that checklist. So, and it was just a question like, God, I did not see this, but it was never any anger there for myself.
And so you didn't say, God, look, I have dedicated so much of my life to you. I'm preaching the gospel. I'm doing all these things you asked me to do. Why did you let this happen to me?
No, that was not in my conversation with God, because I know that regardless of whether you in church 24/7, pay your tithes, have all these degrees, that sickness do come upon this body. And anger is also something that God had given us, that emotions. So if I had anger, then there wouldn't have been a problem for me to express that.
Okay. And so you are part of the same church that I'm a part of in terms of, the denomination. And so we often hear that, if you have, and we know people, they say, if you have faith, you don't need to take this medicine. Now, that's not a blanket statement, right? Because we pick and choose which medicines we're actually talking about, right? I don't need to take this blood pressure medicine because I don't feel hyper. But I am going to keep taking this pain medicine, right? And I'm going to trust that God is going to deliver me, even if I keep eating the same way, even if I don't change my lifestyle. So how do you answer that?
I answer that when you have a diagnosis or you're sick, then you need to be able to manage that. God also gives us wisdom, and if you're not feeling well and you're going back and forth to the doctor, first of all, why go to the doctor if you're not going to take the medicine? That's what I believe. Why waste their time? Because, the medical community is very busy. So why, if the doctor said take a whole pill, am I going to cut it in half? And yes, there are people in the faith community who believe I don't have to do that because, it has side effects. Well, everything has side effects. The air we breathe have side effects. Everything have a side effect to that. And so how I would tell that individual is, do you want to suffer? And I just don't like suffering and pain. So I'm going to take this medication, and then there's things that I'm going to try to do also, because I'm my best advocate to get off of this medication. So if I'm eating ham all week, and I'm wondering why my blood pressure is high, then that's on me. That's not on the doctor. There's a self-care, self-control that we all have to have.
Okay. And so also we're really fortunate because you also are chaplain trained. And so if you could just explain to the audience, what is a chaplain?
A chaplain is a certified clergy member who counsels, provides spiritual care to individuals in healthcare facilities, mental health, in prisons, in children's hospitals, in the military, in hospice, and in the nursing home.
And what is their education and training?
Their education and training, you have to have a master's degree in divinity and or theology, and have at least 4 units of clinical pastoral care, which we refer to as CPE. In addition to that, once you complete the CPE, which I did a residency program at St. Elizabeth Hospital in the psychiatric unit, then you go up in front of a board and you get certified as a certified chaplain. But I can also back it up a little bit, is that you also have to be ordained. In some denominations, you have to be ordained. When I was coming through, you had to be ordained.
Okay, sorry, that's the puppy doing puppy things. And so the reason we're even talking about chaplain, because particularly when you're getting admitted to the hospital and throughout your stay, we will ask you if you would like the chaplain to visit you. Okay, puppy things again. Sit. And so oftentimes in my experience, what happens is people feel that they don't need a chaplain because a couple of things. One, they don't either have a spiritual practice or don't believe in religion. Two, they're not dying, so why should the chaplain come and visit me? And three, I think there's just a lack of understanding of why they're even being brought up into the conversation. And so I wanted to talk about it so people know this other person on the healthcare team who is there to help them in other ways. It's well documented the importance that spirituality and religion have played in people's um, recovery or their experience in either coping, receiving a diagnosis, or getting through maybe a disease that's not curable. And so we know it plays a huge role. And so that's why we invite the chaplain to come and see you when you're in the hospital. There's a number of things they can do. So a lot of times people want to sit and talk to the nurse, and unfortunately that nurse has multiple patients who are at various levels of their illness that might require a lot of time and attention. So they might not be able to sit and talk with you. There are some people who've never been alone. They went from their parents' home to their own home with a spouse and children, and they've never been alone until they're in the hospital. And they could be in their 70s and 80s, and this is the first time they're spending the night alone in a cold, dark room. And there's a lot of fear associated with that. They're scared, they're lonely for the first time, and they're having to deal with this illness as well as these emotions. And so while the nurse is well equipped and trained to support you, they might not have the time, whereas the chaplain does have time. They can come and sit with you, they can talk to you, they can just be a listening ear. They can bring reading materials like Bibles or even the Quran. They can provide devotionals, rosaries. So they're there to provide a number of resources as well as their physical presence. They are notified at the time of death. They come and they're present at the bedside to support the family, sometimes the staff as well, and the patient. They can pray with you. But one thing I love about the chaplain, and I think a lot of people don't know, is through your education and training, you cover all the religions.
Exactly.
And so I think a lot of times when I introduce the idea of the chaplain coming, people think they're there to convert them. And they're not there to do that. They're really there as a neutral party, as a neutral representative. And so they're not going to be converting you. They're not going to be, making you feel guilty for anything. If you're there because maybe it was related to alcohol or drugs or eating disorder, they're not going to be there to make you feel guilty. They're really there to support you, and they're available 24/7, really. And so I just wanted to kind of bring their presence forward. And so did you already go into education and training? I was busy with the puppy.
Yes, I already went into the education
Okay.
and training. And sometimes I would like to add is that sometimes the chaplains, when we come in the room, that they'll ask for a specific, whether it's, Jewish chaplain or a Catholic chaplain, that their preference.
Yeah, you can do that too.
That's very important to know. And to know that the chaplains, that we don't share our conversations with staff or anyone. So the patient feels confident that it's going to stay within both of us.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that.
Between the two of us. Because, sometimes they might think, well, you're going to go back and share it with the staff. No, it's confidential information.
Oh, yeah, very good. Yeah, I can't really think of anyone in the healthcare setting who doesn't have to follow that confidentiality or HIPAA. Of course, there are exceptions to that rule, like if there's a sense that you might be a threat to yourself or someone else.
Right.
But there's still a whole host of other topics you can discuss that you can feel safe will be kept between you and that person who's caring for you.
Definitely. And also we perform memorial services for, people going through bereavement and grief counseling, goal settings, because depending on what setting you are, you want the patient to have goals for when they're going to be released, and so that's something also that the chaplain works with, and also have worship services in the facilities that you're in.
Yeah. So if you've never been to a hospital or you haven't been outside the emergency department, the church, most of the hospitals have like a chapel, and you can physically go down there if you're allowed and you're able. But also typically there's a channel on the TV that you can tune in. And I've worked at a number of facilities. Sometimes they have like partnerships with some of the churches or religious affiliations in the community, and they might come on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly basis and, offer worship and praise or whatever it is that they have been asked to do. So yeah. Before I think that covers chaplain pretty good. And they work in the jail,
We work
right?
in the jail. We work in the I didn't have the opportunity to work with the chaplains in the jail, but there is a chaplain in the jail that do worship services, Bible study, and everything with the inmates. And then hospice facility. I worked in the hospice facility, and that was a very unique experience. And I was trained with Capital Caring to work as a hospice provider. And you go in there, and you basically you're counseling, providing spiritual care for the family, because a lot of times the patient already know what the outcome is going to be. So you're there to comfort the family during that time.
Okay, so this is interesting, since I know particularly the last kind of experience that you had with your training, the most recent one. How's chaplain different from just like minister or someone who attends seminary?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, when you're in the church setting as a minister, you're there just for that particular denomination. And so you might have other people from other religions that convert, but basically you're there for that denomination. Whereas if as a chaplain, you're there for all religions. You have your training teaches you have to learn about all the different types of religion, so that when you have patients that request your services, that you'll be able to provide spiritual care to them, or refer them like to a rabbi or to a Catholic priest. You also do communion. If you are ordained, depending on what the denomination is. So I couldn't do like communion for the Catholic services, but I participated to help the priest do it. So that's a little different. You learn all the different religions, and there's a whole lot of them. And so you have to have an open mind. You have to have an open mind that all of us one day preferably will be going to that great place that we look for. So we have to be able to counsel people on that level.
Yeah, very good point.
So that's very different.
So when you think about the education and training that people in religion in the ministry receive, as well as scholars, are there any areas that you think could be improved or need to be addressed when it comes to caring for people who are sick or dying or grieving?
Yes, I think that in the churches that the ministers should have a level of education, so that they know how to counsel people, because today we deal with so many things, mental health, being one of the major things, drug addiction, and we have in the church, we think that you could just pray everything away, and just, hit your head and everything's going to go away. And that's not reality. Everything's not going to go away. I pray, we all pray, but things do happen in life. And so I just believe that the ministers need to go through at least some type of training. Seminary is not for everybody. That has to be a calling. You have to know whether that is, where God is calling you to go. And I just happened to, that was God calling, because he said that I was going to have a worldwide calling to be able to, this was before I even got my call to chaplaincy, to be able to provide spiritual care to individuals. And so it made sense once I received that calling, why I attended, Howard University.
Okay, so right before, for the last question, we'll close out here, because I know when you were at the most recent place getting your training, that you also yourself received counseling, and there was an emphasis on, if you're going to help someone through X, Y, and Z, you need to address how you feel about these things, and they really challenged you in that area. If you could just share that with us before we close out.
Yes, definitely. So the idea is that before you can go into the room with the patient and try to provide care to that patient, caregiving to that patient, you also have to deal with your own biases and your own issues that you may have not coped with years ago, and you suppress those. And you also have to go through 1 hour of supervisory supervision so that you can deal with what's bothering you, what are you impressed. If you go into the room with a patient and the patient is dealing with, let's say, for example, abortion, since that's one of the major topics. Well, if you are against abortion, how are you going to cope with that person? How are you going to relate to that person? And so that's the purpose of being in, supervisory and as a counselor, whereas in the church, you just, with no training, you just go in there and say, I'll read some scriptures and I'll pray and everything is going to be all right. You just, just keep trusting in the Lord and he's going to take it all away. Whereas for a chaplain, no, that's not the reality of things because you're still dealing with this. And we want chaplaincy brings it out of you.
Well, thank you. Anything else you wanted to share about chaplaincy or faith in medicine?
Well, I just want to say that if you're in need of healing, healing comes in two ways: through faith and through medicine today. And the early preventions of anything is to find out whatever it is that you're going through. Learn about it, ask questions. There's a whole lot of options out there, and a lot of times people will say, well, God didn't tell me to have surgery, or God didn't tell me to take this medication, although I have a terminal illness. Did really God tell you that? Because we also speak to ourselves. Would a loving God that we serve really want you to suffer when you have so many options? And so that's
And on that note, everyone, we thank you so much for tuning in. Just to recap, we talked about faith in medicine, particularly because it plays such a huge role when it comes to whether people receive care or don't receive care, and how they receive information and how they cope with that information, particularly in Black and Brown communities. And as I mentioned, that's part of our training. We have chapters specifically dedicated to each race and ethnicity, and we are taught and trained how to improve our communication and also barriers to care based on cultural traditions. So remember, you can always email us your questions or show ideas to tmi.melanin@gmail.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Please share the show with your friends. Rate the Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a comment and really help support the show and gets the message to those who need to hear it. You can find our social media links and any resources that we've mentioned today in the description box. We release a new show weekly on TMI Tuesdays at 10 a.m. on YouTube and all your favorite podcast apps. Please follow, like, share our content with all your friends. And because I did receive a question, because I'm always asking you to look in the description box and to subscribe, I did have a question on how to do that. So if you're on YouTube, you have to sign into YouTube. So if you already have a Gmail account, that's the easiest way. You can just sign in using the same login and password. And then once you watch a show or a video that you like, if you want to see more content from that person, you hit the subscribe button. And then every time you log in, you go to the subscribe section and you'll see any new content that they've created. There's a little bell underneath this video as well. If you click on that, you'll receive a notification, and that can be found at the top menu on the YouTube page, which changes over time. So depending on when you're watching this, it may be somewhere completely different, but that's how you can subscribe. That's how you can get notified when new episodes appear. And underneath this video is the title and the description box. So right now there's the word more. If you click on more, it expands, and you can see other information that the content creator has left for you. So in our case, all the things that I mentioned, our social media links and how to connect with Reverend Leona Madison or any guest that we have on the show. I just want to mention that because someone did ask. So thank you again. Remember, this is part 1. We'll come back for part 2. So yeah, thank you for watching.
Bye.